So what happened in Exodus 3 was how God called Moses. I really wanted us to talk about that in the real sense of how we also hear the voice of God and how we respond to it. And the basic pitfalls that everyone that God calls, the basic questions we have, and the pitfalls that most of us fall into. I want us to be able to talk about that in the next 20 minutes or 21 minutes. So let's take it this way, that Moses, after the first 40 years in Pharaoh's house, he did something, he realized that he was meant to rule, and then he tried to defend the children of Israel. He lost out in that regard. He was a wanted man, was going to be killed because he killed somebody. And then he ran away from Egypt as a prince, went to the wilderness, tried to survive, eventually getting to Jethro's house where he found succor. And when he got to Jethro's house, Jethro had 7 daughters. And Jethro decided that, okay, this young man is good enough to marry my first daughter. And so Mary married Zipporah. Zipporah was a shepherdess. And so he joined the family business, and he also began to rear sheep. And he did this for 40 years. And this 40 years, it was a season that many of us must psychologically understand. For a prince who had been a leader to come to find himself in that kind of constraint, where he becomes a shepherd, living under somebody's roof, living with his wife's people, Zipporah being a princess, of course, but not the kind of princess, because their own palace is a small stead. It is not like a Egyptian. Many of us here will understand the psychological issues that Moses will have gone through. I really want us to understand that a rich boy, a boy that was raised in affluence, who could speak many languages, who could read and write, who was raised as a prince, because he was hasty, simply because somebody had told him that he was Jew, and he realized that, okay, he wasn't going to get to the throne in Egypt to become Pharaoh. The worst or the best he can do is to become the chief of army staff or to become an ambassador of Egypt to another nation. He couldn't be Pharaoh because he had questionable paternity. And yet he knew his own story that he was a prince. He was trained as a prince, and that he had a people. He has a people that he could lead. But the people who have been subjugated by the Egyptians. And so he wanted to try and do something about it. There was no way he wouldn't have crossed his mind to find a way to set those people free so that then he can rule them. But then he couldn't. So now he now came to Jethro's house, and Jethro's house was a place where nothing is happening. You know, some of us in life, maybe you used to be a bank manager. At a young age, you became a CFO, you became a HR head of admin, your office. At a young age, you became a medical doctor and you are doing so well. And then you had a challenge or a season when things didn't go well. And you find yourself maybe losing your license or getting the sack or getting the boot or getting blacklisted out of that profession that you do know. I've seen many people who from that point, they will just be drinking, they will just be living their life as if they should die, you know, because they've tasted a certain level of success and glory. And for them to come down again, and then when they want to talk, they will say, it's not your fault that I'm in this situation. It's not your fault. I used to be great. They'll be telling stories of their greatness every day in a beer parlor. Say, I used to be the manager of this bank. I used to be, in fact, when I was in the office, can somebody like you talk to me? Do you know, when I wear my suit, I was in Geneva. I was in Roma. I was in this. I went to watch Man Game live. When I hear them speak, those of yester glory, their glory had passed, and yet they couldn't sit up with the reality. To face their current situation becomes a problem. So they will sit down and begin to dream of yesterday. Are you one of those people? that when you speak, your yesterday seems to be better than your today. And so you don't want yesterday to go. So every time you are talking today, you're always talking about, before my mother died, if you know how my father, before I married you, I know how many square meals I ate in a day. I married you now. Look at it. My life is upside down. A lot of people are like that. It's so funny because if they continue that way, they wouldn't go forward ever again. It is one of the things that all of us must learn about life, that life can be curved sometimes, can throw you curveballs. You must make the best of every situation you find yourself, because when you make the best of this particular situation, it would eventually lead you to another great success. You must not see yourself as it is over for me, I'm done with. My husband caught me cheating, and then he chased me out of the house. My life is done. I'm dead. There's nothing in it for me again. I've seen women, a lot of women who couldn't summon the courage to start all over. Moses started all over at least twice. He started over at the age of 40. He started the second lease of life at the age of 80. And then he started over a year later at the age of maybe 82, 83. Because at 40, the life he knew as a prince was over. Then he had to run to Zipporah's people. And then he started over there. He had a wife, he had children until he was 80. And then he didn't tell himself, I'm 80, I'm too old. God, don't call me. No. He started over again. At 80, he started all over. And he was able to rescue the children of Israel, and he became their first Messiah. Just imagine that. So that means you can basically at least start your life over maybe 4 or 5 times in one lifetime. Some people will live abroad. Maybe they were born in Germany. They are starting primary school there. They will get to a certain age. Then their parents will relocate to Nigeria. Then they will be saying, why did you bring me back to this country? Others will start over. Leave. They are not afraid of starting over because they know that the circumstances around them is a variable. Today, it may not look so favorable, but they are the constant. If they keep at it, they are going to break through. They know that. I know that for myself. I will tell people, no matter the country you put me in this world, I will be a tremendous success. It doesn't matter. You know, I was watching Brother Gbenga interview, and they asked that if you are in the desert, and they gave you 3 things. They say, if I'm in the desert, I don't even want a Bible. Bible is in my head. Just let me have my life. In the desert, I will survive, and I will do well, because he will give his angels charge over me. I will invoke them. I know how to start all over. You must learn it too. Not to be defeated by circumstance or situation, telling yourself, I used to have 5 cars, I used to have a house, my father I inherited 3 houses from my father, my uncle did not allow me to take over my father's property, they chased my mother. When I hear such stories, people say it a lot of such stories, and they're always saying it because they couldn't rule and reign over circumstances. Do you know how it is when somebody has cheated you, and then you become a tremendous success? And then you go to the person's house in a helicopter in a Lamborghini, and the person looks at it, and the person is like, oh my God, this guy can't be put down. This guy can't be put down. Why? Because he understands the reality of the Spirit of God that is in him, and it's not going to allow anybody to take away Christ in him. He wouldn't allow anybody to kill the fire of the Holy Spirit that's at work in him. The second thing I want to talk about, which is very important, looking at time, I'm conscious of it. Second thing I want to talk about, when you look at things and you are conscious of the reality of them, the second thing is the call. When God calls a person, wow. You know, your life may be heading in a particular direction. You might think you've got it all figured out, and then God will happen. And when God happens to your life, the first thing you will notice is the intimacy of your conversation with God. You will think you know God before. And then when God happens to you, you begin to have this intimate relationship. Like God will be speaking to you in the middle of a crowd, and you will know his voice, and you will know his way, and you will know his life. You'll be like, oh my God. And yet you'll be struggling at the same time, because that which you have known to be definite, you don't want to leave it. And yet God is saying, go and move in another direction. Then you and God will begin to have a conversation. If I ask many of the people here who are pastors and ministers, they will tell you that they had similar experiences. It is rare for you to see somebody who meets God, the initial divine call, and there was no conversation. The person will speak, God will speak, because God wanted the person to know that, hey, I'm calling you, and God will explain the person's mission. No, not all this. I call myself pastors that they will just go and then you ask them, say, God has called everybody. No, they have a divine call, urgent divine call, and there is always a location, a specific location, and a conversation, and God will tell them, this is what I want you to achieve with this call. I want you to raise unto me nations. I want to raise unto me sons. I want to raise unto me the financial backers of a system. I want to raise for me bankers. God will tell people, and when those people hear it, they know that God has called me for a purpose. And when they have that purpose figured out and ironed out, nothing will stop them anymore. So Moses had this conversation with God. But then, do you know that after God has called you and you have accepted, you then need some big work. You have some big work to do. First, you have to convince your wife if you are married. Moses and Zipporah, only God knows how many hours of fights they had. Zipporah was in her father's house, was contented with her life. She had never left home before. She wasn't somebody that travels everywhere. She was born in Midian. She was living in Midian. This guy came to them as a fugitive, has lived with them for 40 years. They've had 2 children. And then only God knows how Zipporah will be, but Zipporah cannot be less than maybe 55 to 60. Because when Moses left Egypt, Moses was already 40. Zipporah and Moses met when maybe when Moses was 40, 41. And they've lived together for 40 years. So calculate it. Even if she was a teenager when they met, and you had 40 years to whatever age she had, she'll be like 55. Or maybe they even marry early in that time. Say people marry at 12, at 13. They at 13 to 40. That would be 53. And then Moses now said at that age that we want to go back to Egypt. I want to go and rescue my people. Do you know how unsettling that would be for Zipporah? Do you know that she would argue? She would say, no, I don't want to go. This is my father's house. What are you doing at 80? Are you not contented? Am I not making you happy? Is my father's property, my father's business now so bad? Like, what are you looking for again? But this happens to everybody, most of the people that God has called, especially if they were married by the time God calls them. Their partners would kick. Their partners would resist, because you are going to make them leave certainty for uncertainty. You are going to drag them out of the pattern. And people are, all humans are habitual. We are creatures of habit. So it's not easy for somebody to just draw himself out of a particular pattern of lifestyle and then go in another direction that he or she didn't even care about. Zipporah was not called. She didn't see any burning bush. She didn't see angel. She didn't see. She has to believe everything Moses said. Like, I have to trust your word. I leave my banking job. You said God has called you, so me, I should trust that God called you now and leave my banking job, or leave my lawyer job, or leave my 6-figure salary just to follow you into one bush. Do you know how difficult that is? It was difficult. Deborah showed Moses pepper, but Moses was determined in his heart to obey God. And thank God he was able to pull through. This is another lesson I want us to learn, especially those of us who are in ministry, that God will call you. You must have a way to carry your partner along. You must be able to have that conversation. If Moses had to put his hand under his armpit so that his hand will be withered, he will do it. If he had to throw the staff down so that the power will see snake, he will do it. All he will want to do is convince her that, see, me and you may not know where this is leading, but God is leading us. And you must be able to do that with all sincerity. The third aspect of it I want to talk about is the fear factor that everybody that God has called, that they have. All of us claim to be full of faith. I'm full of faith, I'm full of faith, I'm full of faith. I speak with pastors all the time. I know many pastors that God has called that they didn't have the courage to conquer the city God sent them to. You see, when you bring them in the city 3, 4, 10 years after, you will see that they were basically just coasting along. Like God has called them, they've obeyed. But when they get to the place where God has called them to, they couldn't walk in the spirit of might. They will just go and rent one shack, sit down there, and then they will say, we are doing missionary work, and you will notice that they are half-hearted. Even though God has called them and they accepted the call, they didn't embrace it fully. They didn't go to the king of that community and say, God has come into this community to do this, to do this, to do this. They didn't do that. They basically just sneaked into the community. If they enter into a country there, I've seen many. I used to handle a lot of missionaries where I used to work. And I used to look at their attitude towards the work. Some, they became missionaries because of hunger. Some, because they heard that the opportunity to travel to Australia that's why they joined. They wanted to travel abroad. All the missionary work was just to cover face. They just wanted to go somewhere. For men, it was hunger. But when you see a man that God has called, a demenia, hi, the nation he sent to will quake under his feet. I kid you not. When he enters that nation, everything begins to bow because he has a divine mandate from God, a divine instruction from God that tells him how to go and where to go. He wouldn't go there and then sneak into one room and then be doing underground evangelism. No. When he enters into a city, the whole of the spiritual powers in that city knows that the one God has sent has arrived. You know, that this one, this is not a question of invitation or that one big pastor he recommended him. When he comes, he will come in the name of the Lord. He will deliver the mandate of the Lord. Everybody in that place will shake when they hear the word of God. So many of us here, when we get to the place where God has called us, our attitude matters a lot. You know, how much do we trust God? In our conversation with God, what name did he call us? What name? How did he introduce himself to us? For Moses, he says, I am that I am. The name that he didn't even give the Israelites was the name he gave Moses. When Moses got to the children of Israel, they've never heard I am that I am before. God himself told Moses that, see, by the name I didn't show to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that is the name that I'm showing to you, that I'm revealing to you. That is the name you should reveal to them. So Moses went armed with the fullness of trust of God and the power of God. You must always remember this, that when God sent you on the mission, so I've chatted with the pastor last few days, said this ministry is 2 years old, people are not coming. I don't know why I'm struggling. People are not coming to my ministry. There is no money to pay house rent. My wife is tired. In my heart, I was thinking, man, you know, your approach to ministry is the reason why it's the reason why you are not making a success of it. It's true. Approach to ministry matters. If indeed you are convinced that God has called you, you will walk in power. You will display miracles that nobody can question. I learned a lesson from somebody that is not so much of a born-again Christian, but has a ministry, and the ministry was doing well. And the lesson I learned from him was that even though he couldn't speak good English at the time when I was young and I used to watch him on TV, he couldn't speak good English. He didn't have a good dress sense. He didn't have many things. This guy displayed sorcery, camouflaged as if it is the power of the Holy Spirit. He displayed sorcery on TV, did a lot of healing miracles. Everybody began to hear his name. Everybody began to go to his church. And I knew that it wasn't of God. I knew it 100%. I was sure. But I realized then, I learned a lesson then, that if any man is going to go into ministry truly, Jesus Christ said, if they don't see signs and wonders, they won't believe. Even the devil understand that. Yeah, so if you are going to embrace it, the way Moses did it should be the way. You must start with signs. Moses didn't start with argument. He went to Pharaoh and he did signs. Threw the staff down, bah, he did this one, bah. It was the miracle signs and wonders that got everybody's attention. Moses did it the way it should be done. Jesus did the same thing. So when you are in ministry and you are struggling on the right time, people are not coming. Say, Oga, go back, lock yourself in your room, pray in the spirit, charge your spirit up, come out with miracle signs and wonders. Show the world that the God you serve really has given you power over the metaphysical, the supernatural, and all the realms thereabout. Unbelievers are always drawn to the light of one who can show them the way. That way you will no longer have any struggle with people are not coming, this is not working, that is not working. I guarantee it. But if you go with words alone, about the person that our gospel is not of words, of empty words. So it's not words alone. When power goes forth, then the word will follow and the word will now domesticate those who are saved by the power. I hope you've learned a thing or two. Apologies again because we started late. I'll make up for it some other time. If you have been blessed by this class, I'd like you to shout glory.
Glory. Glory.